Welcome to About Sustainability, a podcast by the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, or IGES. I'm your co-host, Andre. This is another special episode to celebrate the contribution of an IGES legend, Mr. Hideyuki Mori. Mori-san has been a leader at IGES for most of the Institute's history, following diverse experience at other institutions, including the United Nations Environment Programme and Asian Development Bank. He retired last year, and Simon, Alice, and I wanted to speak to him about his career, including his long tenure at IGES. In this discussion, we also reminisce about longtime colleague Peter King, who appeared on the podcast last year but unexpectedly passed away a few months ago. Mori-san and Peter were friends, and both played a huge role in steering IGES's course as an international institute. This episode may be of particular interest to IGES staff and prospective IGES staff, but there should be something for anyone who's interested in careers in the environment.
I studied applied chemistry at Kyoto University in the mid-70s, and the topic I chose for my master's degree was hydrogen production using sunlight. And at that time, Japan was in the middle of the second oil crisis, and the government was very much supportive of a kind of research to promote non-fossil fuel energy. The situation at that time was a bit similar to what we have now. However, I found I was not the kind of person to carry out technical research sustainably over many years. So I decided to join the national government to help develop policies to promote renewables in particular. I applied for a position at METI first, but my application was a little bit too late. And fortunately, the Environment Agency at that time kindly accepted me as one of the new staff members for them in the year 1977. 5 years after I joined the government, I was luckily selected to study abroad for 2 years. I chose the Center for Environmental Studies of the University of Tasmania, Australia. There I could deepen and broaden my understanding of environmental issues, particularly through interdisciplinary coursework. And at the time, I was very much involved in environmental impact assessment associated with, for example, power stations in Japan. But most of the power stations at that time was coal-based, and a lot of what was imported from Australia. That made me very much interested in going there to see the other side of the impact.
So that's why you picked Australia?
That's right.
So that's one of the many places that you've worked, but there are also a bunch of others we know from having discussed this with you in the past. You worked at a variety of different important organizations over your career in Asia and the Pacific and elsewhere. What have been the most challenging and maybe memorable and interesting experiences over your career?
I worked for 3 different international organizations. The first was the Asian Development Bank, ADB. The second was United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR. And the third one I worked for was United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. While with ADB, I developed ADB's first and second climate change technical assistance projects. These 2 projects culminated in collaboration with UNDP to prepare a large-scale climate change technical assistance project for Asia, funded by GEF. This project, which was called ALGAS, significantly assisted major Asian countries in strengthening their initial capabilities to deal with climate change. For UNHCR, I successfully prepared its basic environmental strategy in refugee situations. It was based upon a few principles such as prevention, sectoral integration, and local participation. That was very much different from the previous UNHCR practice based upon seeking additional fundraising for its environmental operations. When I was with UNEP, I was the portfolio manager of the GEF division. Apart from monitoring and evaluation, I was involved in developing a few projects for Asia. The most memorable was the Dust and Sandstorm project for China, that's DSS project for China. The potential impact of DSS on Beijing Olympic Games were an international concern at that time. Therefore, in collaboration with China, Korea, and Japan, as well as the ADB, I successfully developed a large-scale GEF project involving all these major international organizations such as UNSCAP and UNCRD. Later, the executive director of UNEP at the time, Professor Klaus Stefan, mentioned this project as the most successful UNEP-led project in Asia in his keynote speech at an international meeting held in Beijing.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project, Mori-san, the Dust and Sandstorm initiative? So is this to do with the amount of dust and sand that gets swept over to Japan sometimes, but certainly over China as well, right?
Yes. And therefore, the major concern was if this dust and sandstorm happened while, for example, the marathon was being conducted, this effect on athletes could not be ignored. So that's the kind of concern they had at that time. And this dust and sandstorm also affect Korea and Japan as well. Therefore, it has become a kind of collaboration project between three countries involving many other international organizations.
And what did the governments implement? I mean, was it a case of getting them to agree to go and stabilize areas of land to prevent dust and sand?
Yeah, of course, to suppress dust from deserted area, that's very important. And therefore, some component of the project were addressing that program, but also good coordination amongst different ministries within China, and to also promote international support from various agencies, international organizations to these ministries in China in a coordinated manner. That was very important. Always, coordination is very difficult. Right?
Yeah, again, especially if three countries like that are involved, I can imagine the complexities.
Yeah.
Alice, I think you were going to ask the next one. So I'm sorry about all the follow-up questions, but I'm done now.
Okay, no, but I actually wanted to know more about that project and if you had any concrete challenges in coordinating with different countries, and if you have any specific stories to share.
If I explain to you the kind of difference between the three international organizations I work for and Japan, that may provide some good answer to your question. Actually, I've been, as I said, engaged in developing a kind of project and initiative which were new for each of these international organizations I served for. And in doing that, the most difficult challenge was, as you have mentioned, coordination, in particular coordination regarding how to secure solid funding. In this respect, there were some differences among the three international organizations I work for. ADB was actually the easiest to secure proper funding because it has its own fund, as you know, and a clearly established procedure. And therefore, to develop a good project for ADB, to me, was very smooth and easy compared to other organizations. The most difficult one was, as far as international organizations are concerned, was UNEP, because the fund had to be obtained from outside, namely from the GEF. It involved a lot of time for detailed coordination and consultation. But this process had a positive effect. It actually stimulated me to develop many useful collaborations with other international organizations, as I have already explained concerning the DSS project for China. But the most difficult was the Japanese Ministry of the Environment. Of course, the Japanese government has a well-established process for budget planning, but it tends to be repetitive and time-consuming. The biggest challenge I faced was also the secret nature and negative stance. Comments from the Ministry environment tend to be mostly negative and scarcely constructive. So this nature of coordination made me sometimes disappointed and discouraged. Sorry for the old negative statements I made about the Ministry of the Environment. That may be due to the hardship I experienced when I just was subjected to the government-wide reform panel in 2009.
When you're dealing with coordinating with so many different countries on environmental issues, there are probably some obstacles related to geopolitical tensions. So how did you have to overcome those tensions, and has that ever been an issue?
Another project I developed while I was with, UNEP was a kind of transboundary air pollution between China, Korea, and Japan. And as you know, perhaps dominant wind in this case is always from west to east. And therefore, because of this geological feature in this region, China always be the cause of pollution. And Japan, and Korea and Japan, always the kind of countries to receive it. And therefore, there has been always a tendency to regard China as a kind of villain. Japan and Korea receiving some kind of bad effect from China. But I did not think that was really fair. The fact that wind blows from west to east is a kind of inevitable thing. And if we ask China to do this, at least same or more level of anti-pollution measures should be taken in Korea and Japan as well. So this kind of thinking, which are fair to all countries, I think that was always a key. And I think basically having a kind of that understanding, in the end, this project was successfully approved. And when I had opportunity to develop DSS project, that concern was there, but because the dominant consideration was its urgency and the implication for the Beijing Olympic game, and therefore that kind of geopolitical complications was not so evident there.
So Mori-san, you got involved in IGES after your time at UNEP. How did that happen? How did you get involved in IGES, and why did you choose IGES?
I returned to Japan in 2003, and I expected to go back to the Ministry of Environment personally. But unexpectedly, I was instructed to join IGES. That was a bit of surprise to me because I had not made such a request. My first assignment at IGES was to take care of a regional initiative called UPFED, the Asia Pacific Forum for Environment and Development, established for the then former Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Ryutaro Hashimoto. That was a very important project. And the initiative was already in place, and my responsibility was to serve as the head of the UPFED Secretariat. After a couple of years, I successfully prepared the final UPFED report, which resulted in the second phase for demonstration of its recommendations. Then I was assigned to develop the first IGES white paper.
You said white paper, Mori-san?
White paper, yes. The president of IGES at that time, Professor Morishima, requested me, after I successfully completed this first white paper, he requested me to stay on with IGES by formally resigning the Ministry of Environment. So by that time, I found IGES an interesting place to work, so I agreed to his suggestion. From that time on, I was fully involved in important government-related decisions of IGES. A couple of years later, I was formally assigned as the Deputy Executive Director of IGES.
How involved were you in determining the research direction of IGES? A lot of our work is not really directly research oriented, but everybody tries to have a hand in research in some or other way. So just curious whether you were able to influence that to some extent.
Actually, there wasn't much clear guidance from the ministry side. And the problem was, how IGES was structured at that time. Although in the very, very beginning phase, IGES had a few policy researchers, but they were, sent from many departments within some universities in Japan. Their concern was to get, for example, degrees with their university they are dispatched from, and they were not necessarily committed to IGES. And therefore, the most important thing at that time was to kind of to have or to make them, at least some of them, fully committed to IGES and feel they are IGES proper research staff members, and then start discuss with them what kind of research topics we should be engaged in. And therefore, we started this process within, I think, the institute, but also in full consultation with board members at that time. Board members at that time gave us a lot of detailed comment on what I should do.
This is incredibly rich and interesting to hear from Mori-san, and also to document the history of IGES for us that work there now and for colleagues that may join in the future. But I just wanted to add one other output that is guiding the direction. That is the integrated strategic research plan, which is a regular plan that IGES develops regarding what we think, what we think is important to research. And I believe that, at least in part, it is guided by the comments and inputs from the board members that regularly meet. But I just wanted to hear Mori-san's comment on that as well.
Yeah, that's really true. Board members at that time were very vocal and willing to suggest what they believe good topics for IGES to take up. But that's their wish, and their wish did not necessarily meet with the kind of staff members working for IGES at that time. I think, therefore, through continuous communication with board members and also as well as close consultation with staff members at that time, in the end, we came up with something reasonable for IGES to pursue.
I've been thinking a lot recently about the kind of organization that IGES is, which is sometimes described as a think tank. And so, with universities, their modus operandi is quite clear. They're very academically oriented, and NGOs are also fairly clear. Think tanks seem to be sort of stuck somewhere between these different worlds, between the worlds of consultancy and academia and NGOs and government as well. How do you see the role of not just IGES, but think tanks in general in the environment? How important and what do you see that role as being?
That's also the kind of important question throughout the history of IGES. If you look at research institutions within Japan, each ministry has not only one, but a few research institutes working for the ministry. And Ministry of Environment has also a big one, National Institute for Environmental Studies in Tsukuba. Therefore, first, we needed to establish a kind of niche for IGES. But compared to these, for example, these established research institutes, its funding and the number of research staff were both limited, but still we needed to find a good niche. And therefore, through very intensive discussions with board members and key IGES staff members, I think finally we came up with the kind of research we should pursue. In short, that's strategic research. But what strategic research means have been discussed for quite some time. And in the end, conclusion may sound rather ordinary, but still I strongly believe, IGES and other strategic environmental research institute should focus on the kind of research aiming at critical impact generation to promote sustainability. Strategic research for sustainability always, I think, necessitate collaboration with key stakeholders, including government officials, international civil servants, civil societies, economists, journalists, politicians, and other key stakeholders. Research for the researcher's sake, I think, which could be carried out in universities, should be discouraged for such institutes. This is so in particular for organizations like IGES that I have mentioned. And therefore, IGES is the utmost priority, or strategic research institute for sustainability should always look at possibility to generate meaningful impact through collaborative research.
And just kind of a related question, Mori-san, I've been thinking and talking a little bit recently about the role of advocacy in the work of people like us, and organizations like IGES. How do you see the role of a think tank like IGES? Again, not necessarily IGES in particular, but how do you see the role of a think tank in advocacy? Because the argument for that is that, we are among the people who understand the problems best, so we would be among the best to articulate them to government. But the case against is that researchers should just present the evidence and then let the decision makers make the decisions. So I'm curious about your view. Do you skew toward one opinion or the other?
I think both should be carried out, not by only one single institute, but in collaboration with other institutes. Of course, some research institutes, including universities, should be devoting a lot of their efforts to carry out so-called perhaps purely scientific questions. But other research institutes and other researchers, maybe not that big percentage of the researchers, should be spending more time for advocacy, because science is the basis for common understanding amongst different stakeholders. And always, therefore, researchers have a key to realize good common understanding and good coordination amongst different organizations to realize sustainability.
What about the public and the media? Do you think that think tanks like IGES are doing enough to communicate with the media and with the public, or do you think that that's an area where there should be more activity?
I do think, for example, collaboration between researchers or IGES researchers and journalists. I don't think that is enough. But it's not necessarily the fault of IGES or other institutions. Journalists themselves, I think, should become more aware of the importance of sustainability and resilient issues. A couple of days ago, I participated in a meeting to discuss environmental refugees or climate change refugees. And this aspect had not been, picked up in Japan by Japan journalists here, but that is becoming very important issue, and really the kind of issue immediately need some kind of actions. But this recognition, for example, is very much lacking in a country like Japan, and therefore there I see a lot of need for further communication between journalists and researchers.
Mm-hmm.
Here you could almost make a plug for an episode that a podcast episode I think we will publish relatively soon, where Alice is discussing exactly that issue around climate security and migration and refugees.
Yeah, Okano-san and Shiba-san, they're actually working on climate security project at the moment at IGES, and it's funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it was really exciting to hear them talk about this very important issue, but that is so little talked about in Japan.
Perhaps it may be related to loss and damage, issues as well, and for which a very encouraging development took place recently at COP. But I think this issue is so big to be, simply absorbed in that kind of newly agreed, mechanism. The issue is potentially much bigger than that.
Yeah. What would you say to young people who are anxious and depressed about the future of the planet? But also, what would you say to people who are joining IGES or other research institute related to climate or environmental policies? Do you think there's a way for them to make an active change and a positive impact through research? Do you think that's the way to find solutions? Or what are other ways that we can solve the world big challenges?
After I retired from IGES, I participated in some kind of training, about 2 weeks training to understand permaculture, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And most trainees are young, and of course I was the oldest amongst them, by far the oldest. And therefore I had a good chance to talk with them. And sometimes I made them get angry. But through that, I learned a lot. And this issue of future generations also discussed. And my message to these young ones was there is no need to worry. And be confident with your capability to deal with future challenges, including those related to sustainability and resilience. There were no past generations that inherited a perfect paradise. A lot of problems always remain, and the following generation had no option but to face them. And this will remain the same for future generations to come. There is indeed nothing new here. I truly trust the young generation to more effectively tackle future challenges, drawing upon their firm commitments and strengthened capabilities. As far as climate change and other sustainability issues are concerned, problems have been mostly identified and basic strategies to deal with them have been already worked out. In addition, we should not forget the fact that future generations will inherit AI and other powerful tools to enable effective solutions. When I was born, it was only a few years after the end of World War II. Japan was in total devastation, having lost key production facilities, essential infrastructures, and a very young workforce. It was indeed almost a complete destruction. But from there, Japan re-established itself as a major industrial power. Problems were turned into challenges, and challenges were transformed into opportunities for various stakeholders to take up. This could be understood as a successful case to rebuild its economy and society after a complete disruption. Although this was, of course, not caused by disruptive innovations as predicted by many experts for a future decarbonized economy to become a reality, I'm quite sure that there are some good lessons to learn from this case.
Mori-san, I have to ask you why or how you made the permaculture course participants angry.
Yes, I wanted to ask that.
Yes. when some of these young participants said, for example, they understood how, for example, plants and animals feel, or even one person, young one, said she feel how the earth itself feel about this devastation caused by humans. So I said to them, no, it's not really possible. And that's why we are here to speak or to think about how they feel through research or something like that. But, with that kind of comment, I made them angry.
It made me think about a common friend and mentor that we do have or did have. That's Peter King. Because very recently I talked to one of Peter King's friends, and he told me that Peter King himself was one of the very first people who introduced permaculture in Australia. At that time, it wasn't called permaculture, it was called something else. And Peter never managed to develop it into what it is today, but he told it as an anecdote, as some work he used to do back 20, 30 years ago. So I just came to think of that.
Actually, it was developed in Tasmania, where I studied. So from that time already, I had some kind of connection to that. And as you know, Peter King believed some kind of spiritual thing as well. He said this was the voice from the God or from the heaven, but may have been from the earth. Yeah, Peter may have understood that already. His sudden death was really unfortunate. I had a promise with him to drink again in heaven over good old memories we have together.
That's a great comment, Mori-san. I just wanted to ask actually a question about the future and regarding what type of work we should be focusing on at IGES as a very old hand and experienced mentor. What do you think the research community needs to focus on more for the future? And like which area or subject issue do you think is of concern? You have already mentioned loss and damage and migration, but these may be among them, but I wanted to hear if there are any other issues you can see in the horizon.
It seems to me IGES or many other conservation organizations may have paid too much attention to climate change. Climate change is, of course, very important issue, but also equally important would be perhaps biodiversity conservation, or perhaps how agriculture and other forestry and others should be practiced. That aspect needs more attention from institutes like IGES. And this biodiversity and other planetary boundary related issues need to be discussed together and come up with some kind of policies, including how sustainable practices will be funded by international organizations and many governments in the world. I think that's really the key. Otherwise, the situation currently we have now cannot be addressed properly.
I only have one more question. That is, what do you miss most about IGES?
Okay. Actually, the life I have now is very different from the time I worked for IGES. What I have missed is therefore regular meeting with IGES researchers and other staff members. This is because frequent communication with you had become a fairly established lifestyle for me while I was with IGES. But still, occasionally, although remotely, I have certain IGES staff members serving as lecturers and discussants in virtual symposiums. I feel extremely happy when I recognize such IGES staff members become more mature and confident. In this way, I believe what I have missed will eventually become warm and old memories for me in the end. I worked for many organizations, as I have already explained, and therefore I have accumulated a lot of old memories. Having many old memories means one is already too old. And therefore, as mentioned already, the time I had with Peter, I think that was last May, when he visited IGES headquarters. You organized a small drinking party with him, and I had talked with him a lot about our common memories. That kind of occasions was the time I feel very happy these days.
What are you up to now? So you did your permaculture traineeship. How are you going to use the knowledge and skills that you learned in that training?
Okay.
Do you farm a lot, or?
No, I wanted to make a local contribution to promote sustainability locally, for example, this Suginami city of Tokyo. And therefore, yesterday, for example, I participated in this study group meeting organized by one of the small groups in Suginami city. The topic yesterday was about interesting education system in Denmark. And that was very, very interesting. Next time or the time after next, I'm supposed to talk with them. Maybe, some kind of experience I had with international organizations will be provided and share with them for lively discussion. And I think that is going to be the basis for example, Suginami City to become more sustainable and resilient.
Thank you for listening to About Sustainability. Please subscribe at podcast.iges.jp or search for About Sustainability wherever you normally get your podcasts. If you've got feedback, you can review us on your podcast directory of choice or reach out on Twitter at IGES_EN. About Sustainability is produced by the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. Any views expressed during the podcast are those of the speaker at the time of recording and do not necessarily reflect the views of IGES. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. We don't take that lightly, and we hope you'll join us next time.
Mm-hmm.